Greetings. On behalf of Accessible Fellowship's Salt and Light Bible Study, I am Peter Albright. In our discussion last week, we talked about what the Lord's Supper perhaps could be when compared to a sacramental communion. Once again, we were discussing the obligation or opportunity for Christians to sacrifice their personal freedom for the sake of others. This coming Sunday, May 18th, we will be looking at lesson number 12, No Spiritual Gifts Without Love. The text is taken from 1 Corinthians chapter 12 through 14, and the purpose is to discuss a variety of spiritual gifts used to build up the church and declare that they are worthless unless performed through agape love. Now, in preface, I would like to mention that Dan Neiswander, the author of the Believer's Church Bible Commentary, 1 Corinthians, presents in his commentary a rather strong argument for replacing the phrase gifts of the Spirit with the phrase manifestations of the Spirit. His discussion is based on Scripture and an intimate familiarity with New Testament Greek, and it certainly gives us something to think about. Back in 2014, I was going to a church that was searching for a new pastor, and one of the interim pastors, who I really enjoyed, we'll call him Pastor Dave. Dave was unusual because he was a retired Presbyterian minister, acting as interim pastor in a Mennonite church. I learned two things from Pastor Dave. First of all, I learned the extent to which biblical principles shaped the music of the 60s and the 70s, those turbulent years when our society was threatened, perhaps rightfully so. The other thing that I learned from Dave is that if I find that many sincere, thoughtful, devout Christians have a belief that differs from mine, there are several possibilities. There is a possibility that they're wrong. There certainly is a possibility that I am wrong. Logically, there's a possibility that everybody is wrong. But there is also a possibility that there's more than one valid way to view the truth. Hold that thought. I've learned a lot from going to church in my youth, and I refer back to those lessons many times. Sometimes the things that I was taught aren't exactly the same as what my current beliefs are. One of the things I remember being taught with all sincerity is that the apostolic spiritual gifts died with the original apostles. It's not that God couldn't offer those gifts now, it's just that he doesn't. Well, I guess at least not at that church at that time. We were taught that the other gifts, the gifts of service and especially the gifts of administration, were still going strong. Later in my life, I realized that many devout Christians personally experienced charismatic manifestations of the Spirit. I struggled with it some, prayed about it a lot, and I'm now fully at peace with a wide range of human experience in the realm of manifestations of the Spirit. The thing that I'm very certain about is that God does provide what is needed for his church. The process of thinking about it made me reminisce about Pastor Dave again. So in preparation for this Sunday and this podcast, using Google's Gemini generative AI bot, and the first thing that popped up on my screen is the information that people also ask: what are the 22 spiritual gifts? What are the 12 spiritual gifts? What are the 9 spiritual gifts? And what are the 7 spiritual gifts? Remember, I had just asked, what are spiritual gifts? Gemini's analysis looked very much like what I used to assume. There were several different categories in the discussion. What are spiritual gifts? What are the types of spiritual gifts? Why are they important? And how do you identify your own spiritual gifts? It was a wonderful essay. It had 37 cited references. As a college professor, seeing that many references, I would probably say this was generated by artificial intelligence. I looked over the list, and there were some credible resources there. The thing that stuck out like a sore thumb was there was not one single reference to the Bible. All of the references were to secondary sources, I guess I would call them. Maybe in a letter written to promote unity, Paul was just telling the Christians in Corinth to show love and unity by the way they worshiped. Perhaps he wasn't developing a comprehensive list of spiritual gifts. Perhaps he was not trying to write one of the world's greatest essays on the nature of love. Maybe he wasn't trying to differentiate between the different strengths of prophecy versus speaking in tongues. Maybe he was just telling the Corinth Christians to love each other. Maybe he was just showing the Christians in Corinth to show their love for each other by showing respect for each other in their worship. Join me this week in praying that our love for each other will be so much like the way that Jesus Christ loves us, that all people, that all creation will marvel. Thanks for hearing me out, and have a good week.